On today's World Entrepreneurship Day, CEO of Furaha Afrika Holdings, Matsi Modise, sees herself as an entrepreneurship activist. She successfully straddled the world of high-powered corporate leadership and being an advocate for transformation in business. Modise joins us now via Skype from Port Elizabeth to talk about some of those realities in the business front. Matsi, I definitely can describe you as one that has been a trailblazer, especially where entrepreneurship and creating strategic opportunities for entrepreneurs is actually concerned.
Hi, Faith. Thank you so much. It's always such a pleasure to have an opportunity to engage with you. And Faith, you're one of those people that has seen my journey transform. I've known you for a lot of years. I've worn a couple of hats. And now I'm happy to say that I'm running a successful business in modern day South Africa. It's definitely not easy, but definitely worth celebrating, especially today.
I mean, as a business mentor, I know that you are a weekly feature on one of the radio programs in itself. What would you say are some of those issues that are confronting the entrepreneurship phase? And also, how do we practically mitigate against those factors?
I think it's important to realize that the biggest challenge is not access to funding, especially in South Africa. We do have a lot of money, but it's our ability to actually get to that money, our ability to be investment ready as entrepreneurs. How do we engage with investors in a manner that we are selling our value proposition as our businesses? When you're in business, you're solving a problem in society. So how do we clearly define that? And also, how do we clearly define how we're going to create a successful business out of it? So I think for me personally, access to markets is one of my biggest challenges because once you have access to markets, it's easy to say you are in business. Somebody is able to buy, be able to procure your product or your service. So those are some of the biggest challenges that we have. And I think also being a female, celebrating Women's Month, it's important to understand that now is a time for women to take their place in our society, especially in our economy, because everybody wants us to win, but it's how do we navigate through the system? It's not a very simple system. It's quite complex, but you have to leverage the power of opportunity and also the power of, there's so many opportunities out there. And it's not a simple task, but it's something that if you have a clear solution to some of the problems that we're having and you're able to leverage these opportunities, it's important that you go for it.
Speaking about leveraging opportunities, also the whole issue around your network is your net worth. How is it that, especially individuals, and let's not even look at people that are in the cities. Let's forget about Johannesburg and Cape Town for a second there. Let's just go into Mpumalanga, to Kurman, for example. Yeah. And those individuals that need access to the right uncle, or would I say the right individual who's able to open up those markets, the right individual that's open to open up those doors. Not everybody is privy to that rich uncle who's able to give me capital or investment that I'm able to get over 5 years' time. So how then do we start speaking to that entrepreneur who simply says to you, listen, my network right now is probably much more poor than I am, and I'm supposed to do something to get out of this?
Correct. And the best way to get into something is by leveraging your network. But how do you leverage your network when you're in a township environment, rural environment? I come from a small town in the Free State called Kwakwa, and for an entrepreneur in Kwakwa, it's way difficult for them to have access to these kind of opportunities and information. And social capital is something that is lacking. So what's important is there are different stakeholders, role players in our ability to help entrepreneurs. And it's important that we start taking these opportunities to townships, start taking these opportunities to rural areas, start creating these ecosystems that we're talking about. I mean, how many working spaces, there's WeWork, there's Workshop 17, they're all populated in the main cities like Cape Town, like Johannesburg, like sometimes Durban. But when are we going to start having thriving, enabling environments that are conducive for township entrepreneurs? Because that's where the majority of our people are in South Africa. And so it's very, very important for us to not do what is easy and to roll up our sleeves and ensure that we are creating enabling environments in where our people are living. So I would love to see us establishing, one of the things that I'd love to see is one day having an innovation hub in a place like Kwakwa, an innovation hub in a place like, the outskirts of Port Elizabeth. I'm here for work, but it's also important for us to acknowledge that these opportunities must be taken into our environments where our people should be thriving. It's very important, Faith. Otherwise, we are not going to see that economic growth. Otherwise, we're going to continue having an economy that's not inclusive, and we are setting ourselves up for disaster. So as much as I am a thriving entrepreneur. My business is doing well. Yes, I'm based in Johannesburg, which is where the business is. It's important that how do we take the elevator down as you rise? It's very, very important. How do we play it back?
And then what about this notion that by 2030, for example, the small business sector is actually supposed to be incubating somewhat 90% of the workforce? In other words, providing jobs for those individuals in the current economic climate, number one, with the current access to well, when it comes to actually registering your own business, right? So the expense that is involved with you even being an entrepreneur from the ground up, there's still a hefty expense to pay. So then where do we start in putting pressure so that some of those barriers to entry can actually fall down?
Well, currently, small businesses employ 60% of the workforce, right? That's a statistic. And for us to get it to 90 is only going to be achieved is the public and the private and civil society work together as a collaboration. We realize that everybody's operating in silos and we're all trying to achieve the same thing. There's a lot of pressure for, the private sector to employ more and more people. And we know that with technology, things are changing. That's why a lot of people are being retrenched. So there is an importance for us to be able to say, public sector, private sector, you have the resources, you have some of the opportunities. How do you work with, organizations on the ground that are actually incubating, accelerating small businesses? How are we facilitating access to opportunities, access to markets? Because, government can be the biggest procurer, but there's a level of things are not transparent. By the time a tender comes out and we know it's a public sector tender, somebody else, the impression is that somebody else already is going to get it. What's the point of doing it? So it's really taking away from the opportunity for small businesses to really be, competitive in these bids, because government could potentially be one of the biggest, supplier procurement opportunities. They are. But there's a huge monopoly. The same people keep getting the same opportunities. They're not making the pie bigger. I could also equally say with the private sector that, well, one of my personal biggest challenges when I go out there and I say, here's my company, Furaha Solutions, we do outsource HR solutions. I'm looking for an opportunity for me to provide my services and my solutions to you. The most common response is we already have an existing supplier of what you have. What are the chances of that supplier being somebody who is empowered, somebody who still needs an opportunity to get in there and to, really, really enlarge her opportunities to provide her services? So private sector equally has a role. There's a lot of nurturing that has to happen, especially in South Africa where we have legislation and supply and enterprise development that's part of Triple BEE. Yeah. It's a huge industry.
Well, Matsi, it's a huge industry, but at the same time as well, it's an industry, and you rightfully say that it is an industry, unfortunately, that needs to be opened up, and we need to start having more transparent and practical conversations around that. You and I can speak the whole day when it comes to entrepreneurship, I know, so we're going to have to leave it there for this afternoon. Matsi Modise there, who is the CEO of Furaha, really giving us the realities around entrepreneurship. But